We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
So this week I will be making two videos, one about Joe Biden and one about Donald Trump. This video right here, I would just be talking about Joe Biden. Now when I make this video, it doesn't mean that I support Joe Biden. It also doesn't mean I support Donald Trump. I just want to talk about these two nominees and these two presidential candidates and just kind of analyze them, talk about what's good about them, what's controversial about them, what their behavior is, and things like that. I think Joe Biden's biggest threat in terms of being elected is Joe Biden. The problem with him is, I think, I'll just play a bunch of clips and you can tell me what you think about them.
Vice President Biden, the Me Too movement has forced a cultural reckoning around the issue of sexual violence and harassment against women in America.
What happens now is that we, in fact, have to fundamentally change the culture. No man has a right to raise a hand to a woman in anger other than in self-defense, and that's rarely ever occurs. And so we have to just change the culture, period, and keep punching at it and punching at it and punching at it.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black. We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. We choose unity over division. We choose science over fiction. We choose truth over facts. If you agree with me, go to Joe 30330. My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate.
So the problem with Joe Biden is that his cognitive abilities, or rather his brain, is just not working. So, you know, he always has these things, like when he talks at rallies or at speeches, when he tries to talk, he always stutters. So that's the biggest problem about him, and that's what concerns a lot of Democrats and a lot of people, because Trump is a very good debater. You know, Biden might be leading him in the polls right now, but Trump, he's very good at debating. And if Biden is just gonna be there, like not being able to form words, then I don't think it's gonna go very well for him. And you know, some of these things that Biden says aren't just like a little mistake. You know, with him talking about fighting domestic violence by punching at it and punching at it. Some of them aren't just jokes like that. You know, you've got like bigger problems. For example, when he says things like poor kids are just as smart as white kids, or something like if you don't vote for me, then you're not black. These things are genuinely concerning, because if you flip the image, if it were Trump who said these things, the media would be all over him, bashing him and calling him a racist and a sexist and things like that. But I guess it's good for Biden in the sense that he has the media to defend him no matter what. Sort of like Trump with Fox News. You know, every time he stumbles or says something stupid, you have the news media, you have the news kind of defending him. But again, this is unacceptable, because, you know, he's one day he's gonna say too much. He's gonna say too much. He's gonna stumble, and then the media basically can't defend him. I'm not saying that his stumbles or his gaffes are what represents him. I don't think he's fundamentally racist or sexist. But, you know, it's very easy to believe that. You know, it's very easy to believe that he is a racist, because sometimes, you know, when you don't think about some things, you tend to tell what you're actually thinking. And what if this is the case with Biden? What if he genuinely thinks that white people are superior, and that if you're black and you don't vote Democratic, then you're a disgrace to your race?
She doesn't have the look. She doesn't have the stamina.
And, you know, when you look at Biden and you look at his assumpted mental problems, it's concerning, because, you know, Trump made the same argument to Hillary, the fact that he doesn't have the stamina. And if the United States are to have a leader, that is Joe Biden. You know, at least Trump, he can form proper sentences, like full sentences. What if you have a president that can't even form simple sentences? What does it mean to the United States of America? Like, what does it actually mean? What if they can't negotiate with other countries? What if they're seen as more of a joke than they are right now? To be honest, I genuinely don't understand how Biden is the presumped Democratic nominee. Like, I don't understand how they couldn't find someone better than him. Like, I'm assuming it's because he was moderate compared to people like Kamala Harris or Bernie Sanders and people like that. But it's very concerning. You know, it's at this point, it's not about not wanting Trump in office, right? It's more about how can we find the best president for us. And if you have a president that can't even talk, that is pretty concerning. And the fact that Obama endorsed Biden probably means that Biden is going to be the Democratic nominee, because the most of the Democratic Party, they respect Obama, so a lot of Democratic voters are going to vote who Obama endorses. And if Obama endorses Biden, it's pretty presumptive that he's going to be the Democratic nominee, and they can't change it because, to be honest, it's too late. And if they change it, it kind of ruins the reputation for Obama. I believe that it's not very hard to find an alternative to Biden, because genuinely, I don't think he's mentally well. Like, I don't mean that offensively, but I don't think in order to run the biggest country in the world, you need to have stamina. You need to at least be able to form sentences, and I don't think Biden just has that in him to do that. It's not very hard to find an alternative to him. Joe Biden, he doesn't really have any policies. His campaign is campaigning on the fact that Trump was a bad president and he mishandled the coronavirus. Trump's approval rate is just dropping down every single day, and if you look at the general election, Biden is leading him. And looking at the polls, his campaign is working. But it's kind of concerning that Americans are willing to just vote for someone because they don't want Trump in office. And to be honest, it's not quite clear what his policies are, because if you look at his policies, for example, this one, LGBTQ, equality, and most of these things mention Trump. You look at immigration, Black America, and women. All of these things mention Trump. If you have Trump in your policy, he doesn't really have a clear policy. Most of his policies are just that Trump is bad and you should vote for me. We're going to undo what Trump did. And while we're on social issues, let's talk about Biden's presidency. So, as opposed to picking a vice president based on competency and how well they can do the job, he wants to pick a vice president based off of the fact that they're a female. And isn't that sexism? And this topic, it's not specifically Joe Biden. It's more of his colleagues and what they say about the Tara Reade sexual assault allegations. So basically, if you didn't know, Tara Reade had allegedly been sexually assaulted by Joe Biden while she was working for him. For example, Nancy Pelosi, almost a year ago, there was an accuser for Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh is this Republican Supreme Court judge, and there were also sexual assault allegations towards him. And basically, Pelosi expressed support for the accuser. But when somebody accuses Joe Biden, apparently you're not going to answer this question again. These are two bipolar responses. So in one end, you have this believe all women and hashtag me too. You talk about these things, right? And it's true, these things are very important. But then you also have this hypocrisy where if the accuser is accusing someone who's a Democrat, you're not going to talk about it again. But if this person is a Republican, on the other side of the political spectrum, you're supposed to express fully support and believe the women. I'm not saying to believe Tara Reade, because some of her accusations are kind of weird as well. But I'm saying you have to be consistent about what you're saying. So you can't just go here and say that you support the Kavanaugh accuser and then you don't want to talk about the Biden accuser anymore. So it's very interesting to see how this plays out. Now, there are obviously also some controversial stuff concerning Joe Biden about his touching, I guess, the best way to put it. And obviously I'm not going to show that in this video, but just so you know, that there are obviously some criticism about this. And to be honest, this is a pretty big disgrace. Obviously Trump doesn't have a good public image either. But Trump, everything that's been said about him are all allegations, right? But it's displayed in Joe Biden. You have things like these. If you search up this, you can see all these videos and you can watch them. Obviously they're very disturbing, but you can watch these and you can make an opinion yourself. But in my opinion, I think it's a pretty big disgrace. You talk about Trump not having a good public image and talking, his tape that was released in last election, which was also a very big disgrace. But, Trump only talks about those things, But on the other hand, you have Biden, who actually does these things. And it's very creepy, it's very disturbing, and I think it's just very wrong. So you might ask, if there are so many bad allegations about Joe Biden, and if his public image is so bad, how is he the lead runner in the Democratic presidential candidate? Well, number one is because obviously he was the vice president to President Obama, and President Obama is very well respected, and also because he's fairly moderate when you compare him to people like Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren. You know, the media also has a pretty big bias towards Bernie Sanders, in the sense that they really don't want him to have any exposure, and they paint him in a bad way, which in my opinion, some of his policies, Bernie's policies, are pretty stupid. But I think that the media is also very unfair to Bernie Sanders, and I think between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, I think Bernie would probably be the better presidential nominee. So I honestly, to be honest, I don't care who you vote for, but I urge you to not just vote for someone because you can get Trump out of office. And I'll make a video about Trump later this week, but I think, in my opinion, I don't think Biden has the presidential look at the moment. You know, he hasn't shown me like what he can actually do. You know, his speech is a bit worrying. You know, his allegations, he needs to clear that up, and his behavior in the past are also pretty controversial. To be honest, without the media right now, I doubt he would be the front runner. So how can he win this election? In my opinion, for him to win this election, he needs to keep on pointing out the stupid things that Trump says, that Trump does. You know, he needs to point out that Trump mishandled the coronavirus. He needs to point out all the bad things about Trump. And this is, in my opinion, one of the only ways he can win the presidency. And as you can see, I showed you the polls a bit earlier. It's definitely working. You know, Trump is obviously failing in a lot of Americans' eyes, and because he's failing, I think Biden will do well. But how well, only time will tell, because, you know, you never know. Biden might say some other stupid thing, or maybe he won't do any more virtual rallies and more interviews because his team is afraid that he's gonna spill more stuff.